thank you so much to the entire team at Apex. It has been a really wonderful and, like a lot of work, but really wonderful year with all of you as well with the artists. Thanks for that introduction. And I hope that everybody that, has joined and continues joining, engage, participate. If you have questions throughout the conversation, feel free to drop them in the comments, or if you have a comment as well, add them to that. And if you want to have your videos on, it's always nice. This is being recorded, so, safety protections, we get that, secrecy or privacy. But if you want to, show your faces, that makes me feel really happy to see your faces as well. Now, let's start with a little bit about the exhibition. Build What We Hate, Destroy What We Love is a show that really highlights narratives of Venezuelan migration, especially in the context of the last 10 years, which is, has really been an explosion, almost a boom of migration from Venezuela that has, spilled throughout the Americas. And it's a migration that for really over 20 years has been happening, mostly going to the south, crossing borders to Colombia, which has the biggest, population of Venezuelans right now across the world, other than Venezuela, obviously, of Venezuelan migrants. Colombia, Brazil, going to, neighboring or like, even if not neighboring by geography, just that limit, neighboring as, the cultural aspect. And in the last decade, we've seen that shift going, from the South, Venezuelans who have gone to Chile, to Argentina, to Brazil, to Ecuador, Colombia, and really refocusing their journeys to come now up to the North, which is where me I'm located, and the other artists are as well, at least two of them. Ronald is, switching and jumping from place to place, but maybe he'll end up in the US as well. I am a Venezuelan migrant. I came to the US in 2011 requesting political asylum because of my work as a human rights attorney, as a human rights lawyer back at home. And so in my role of being an attorney, of, recopilar, recording all sorts of atrocities that were occurring and continue, sadly, to occur in the country, attacks to students and different organizations, activists. These were, in a way, my work of recording, of archiving these stories to maybe one day, not immediately, seek for that justice, that legal justice, like we need to, people are going to go to court, people are going to, which eventually some, have made it to Supreme Courts, not in Venezuela, but internationally, in The Hague, La Haya, La Haga. But I didn't realize that all of that training and all of that history that I had personally really was sort of setting the foundation for the work that I'm doing now, especially with this show and a couple of shows that I've done before, also focusing on Venezuelan artists, on Venezuelan migration, on really deeply personal stories, because it's not just happening to me. It's not just happening to a couple of people. Today, there's over 8 million Venezuelans who have been forced to leave the country. And Venezuela, for information, is a country of about 30 million, a little less than that. So we're talking about a 30%, over 25% of the population of the country. Again, for decades, it has been one of the biggest migration crisis in not only the Americas, but in the world, especially in the biggest one in a country that is not at war, that doesn't have an internal conflict or external conflict. But it has been, a process of slowly but steadily really just deteriorating the structures that, are sustaining the nation. And now we're, Venezuelans are our biggest export of the country. And so, yes, I'm really excited to join Apex Art and to work alongside of Ronald Pizzoferrato, Cassandra Mayela, Juan Diego Perez La Cruz, to bring those stories to life through the objects that are being part of that movement as well. Because this is such a personal, painful, sometimes complicated, and at times dangerous process, the idea of focusing on objects as mediums of storytelling was really important to us to protect the personality, the personhood, this, to protect the persons who are going through this process, but we can still see kind of like through these items, these clothes, these photos, these literal objects, and get a more universal read of these stories, because what happens to one happens to many. So I think we're gonna start heading in. I think Brian's gonna help us see the 3D gallery. So welcome everybody to Apex Art Online. And let's start with the video. The first piece that we're gonna be talking about is the video by Ronald Pizzoferrato. This is right behind us. And this video is about 4 minutes long. We may see a few, seconds of it in a minute. This video was made in the last year, 2023. It has been a work in progress from Ronald himself, who, as a photographer, as a visual researcher, artist, that really is dedicated to matters of identity, migration, violence. He himself actually took the trek by foot that millions of migrants have undertaken so far. He walked from Venezuela to Ciudad Juárez in Mexico. So he not only has been documenting these migration processes, causes of the migration, effects of the migration, different types of solidarities that are born along the way, but has been himself, has put himself through the physical journey of walking across nations, jungles, seeing, firsthand, in a way, kind of like photojournalistic approach, but very much like personal, artistic, like building relationships with people along the way. It was really wonderful to see, excerpts of video and photos and like trying to blend all of these pieces together. And he would seem like, oh my gosh, like I made it to so-and-so place, because we were staying in touch throughout the process. And it's like, oh, I saw this guy who like used to cut hair in Colombia. He made it. Like, I'm so glad he made it. He's now here. But like we lost track along the way and then somehow reconnected. So all of these stories are a little bit embedded in the video. We'll see some primary sources, some secondary and like, footage, archival footage mixed into the video. And one of the things that I really find fascinating was this lens of the walking, the movement that's happening, not just across borders and jungle, but if you see actually in this image, you'll see a person that is clearly going, up a hill in a very bushy area. This is the Darien Gap, which is a very dangerous, El Tapón del Darién, a very dangerous section of the trek that goes through Panama, one of the deadliest, jungles to walk around. And in the background, you'll see people walking freely, very, nonchalantly in Sabana Grande, in Caracas. So to juxtapose these ideas of walking a movement that we're always, surrounded by and we're always participating in, was really special. I think maybe, Ryan, we can put like a little 10-second clip. Let's hit play and see.
entra aquí a la selva. Entonces de aquí, $150 por pasarte todo hasta aquí, hasta la montaña de la muerte, que le dicen ellos ahí. Que están ahí, que ahí están las 3 banderas.
Como nos llevamos dinero, tocará buscar la manera de cómo continuar el camino, ¿verdad? Nos han comentado que como los haitianos llevan dólar, ellos llevan sobre equipaje, llevan niños. Nos han dicho que con la carga de un niño podemos ganarnos que sean unos $50 al día, o como también con la carga de un equipaje. Esos son relatos que nos han pasado otros migrantes que ya han pasado por allí, como para facilitarnos la manera de continuar el viaje. No quiere decir que somos Sansón, que hacíamos cargar un niño, no. Nos toca botar todas nuestras pertenencias para poder colaborar y llevar al niño, a la persona, y así obtener nuestro cometido. ¿Cuál es el cometido? Obtener un poco de moneda para salir de lo
What
que
you've
es
been
la selva, el
listening and
cajón del
seeing,
Darién.
it's just an excerpt of this, 4-minute video. And it actually helps transition to the photographs, which we'll see. And right now, you may have noticed that in the video, in like some parts, there's movement, there's, footage of these travel or of these journeys, but then there's also these photographs that are like popping in a couple of moments. Two of these are actually exhibited here. We can see las morochas, la familia, el colchón in that order. And these are photographs that were also taken throughout the journey. These 3 ones in particular were taken in Cúcuta in Colombia, which is border town between Venezuela and Colombia. Place that I used to go all the time when I was a kid, and it has really become this like nexus between 2 cultures, the same culture at times, and that has seen so many Colombians going to Venezuela at one point, and now so many Venezuelans either returning because they had their roots there or going to, seek help, refuge, even to go kind of like when I did when I was growing up. I'm from El Zulia, which is east, state, borders Colombia, and we would go shopping, we would buy our clothes there and then come back, on the bridge. And a lot of people do that right now to go to school. A lot of kids going to school in Colombia and then coming back to Venezuela to go to sleep. These people that are here presented are people that are starting their journey of migration. They're in Cucuta, and you can see that they are covered. Their faces are covered by the items that they're carrying across the travel and at the very early stage of the travel. So you can see still, a mattress, a colchón, a little backpack, cobija, a blanket, jackets, that, a soccer ball, which in part, they really intrigued me when I saw these, because in the larger history of portraiture, portraits are made for people that are very rich. And like the idea is to display wealth, display all of the, objects that you can show off in a way. And so this is kind of like a take on that, or that's how I interpret it in, one of the many interpretations, while discussing with the artists and how these people are showing their wealth. This is what wealth looks like for a person that's walking from one country to another and another and another. It is the most valuable object that you can have. For, in the case of Las Morochas, the twins, they're 2 young kids, soccer players, like their most valuable object, item, the thing that they would carry across borders if they could bring anything, would be a soccer ball, or a jacket, a little backpack. When you can see the picture in the middle, you can see a mother and her child. And what you can see is like, you can only imagine what that little backpack can carry. If you were in that position of like, you have to escape, you have to really leave the country by foot, what would you bring with you? So it makes us question that. It makes us question what value is, what is worth saving, bringing, moving, and leaving behind as well. And at the same time, as I mentioned at the beginning, these are such personal and deeply complicated, dangerous stories, or journey travel, that it's also important to protect these people from being vigilated, from being judged. So to use those objects of value to cover their faces is a way, to use them as protection. These are also objects that are used for protection. This is a blanket. This is a little mattress. These are the things that are the most protective items for the people. And at the same time, by abstracting their personality, by abstracting their, features, we can only imagine, like, these could be Venezuelan migrants, but they could be anywhere else. These pictures could have been taken in so many places, and we no longer are talking about like one particular migratory or migration crisis. It's happening everywhere in the world, and I don't think migration is the crisis. The crisis is what's causing them. So let's see. Now we're going to move to the back to look at some text-based artworks by Juan Diego Pérez La Cruz. And if I'm like trying to be aware of time, because I will speak a lot. So I'm like, let me get to all of them. Questions, comments, please leave them in the chat. This wall is really interesting. We have 5 pieces by Juan Diego Pérez La Cruz, and then a little book on the bottom shelf that's also a Ronald artwork. We should start there, maybe, because as you saw in the video and the pictures, all of these pieces are interconnected. And that little book, it's called Memorabilia Migrante, Migrant Memorabilia. And these are a collection of photos that the artist took along different journeys, different routes by foot, of objects that had been left behind throughout the journey. And you cannot see it on the video. If you can visit the space in person, it would be great, for you to flip around and see all the different objects, from clothing. You can see a shoe that has been interred, in the dirt. There's toys, there's, documentation, personal IDs, things that are just become too heavy of a burden, become too much to carry, and eventually just become obsolete, and you just abandon it, which can open a whole can of worms discussion on not just identity and migration, but violence, state violence, geographic, geopolitical assessments and policies, and even ecology, like what we're doing to the earth as we, provoke all of these very dangerous treks and journeys. Now, the rest of the wall, you'll see 5 stanzas, 5, little verse paragraphs of anthems. Maybe, if you're Venezuelan, if you're over here, I was like, oh, raise your hand, but I can't see you. But every country has a national anthem, or almost every country, I guess, has a national anthem. National anthems are one of these, symbols that are not physical, but are very spiritual, super ingrained in the psyche of its citizens. And in Venezuela, as I'm sure that in other countries as well, each state has their own regional anthems. Most anthems are very violent, when you're trying to be patriotic, and like this machinery of nationalism and pride tend to be very aggressive, macho. The blood spilled by our soldiers, we killed the Spanish, da, 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 da. And so they're very passionate, and they're very angry. If you hear the national anthem in Venezuela, there's always this line, el vil egoísmo que otra vez triunfó, the vile egotism that once again won, or the once again triumphs. And so we have to keep battling. What Juan Diego did over here is that by studying different regional anthems, and I guess you can read them, it's pretty clear too. I was really excited to see, sobre palmas y lauros de oro, over palm palm trees, and laurels of gold. Like that's the first line of the state of Zulia anthem, which is where both of us are from. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I recognize that. And then I recognize, lines from the state of Carabobo. I recognize a line from El Estado, Mérida, from the Andes. So you start seeing lines. This is a lyrical collage, is what we ended up calling this. It's basically a remix of all these different regional anthems in an attempt to bridge and like connect all of these different parts of Venezuela into like one, new anthem. Um, Also to, remember that connection, especially in the context of these migrations. People are leaving, and they're not leaving Venezuela like, oh, like Venezuela is just like one very simple thing, or Caracas, which is, the capital, the place most people will hear outside and recognize. But there's so many parts of Venezuela that don't even get mentioned, even when you are in Venezuela. So I think that was like a really beautiful attempt. And my favorite thing too is that when you start reading line through line, all of that macho, strongman, bloody, violent is completely forgotten. So it's not a reinterpretation at all. These are lines that are part of those anthems, but they're talking and like really inkling into the beauty of nature, of animals. They're talking about, being absorbed between or among lightning, being a patrimony, like the jungle being a patrimony like no other, over the river, the desert, the dune. And they start bringing together all of these really beautiful, really like tactile memories of what the land is, and not, continuing to highlight not just the violence, but the assertion of men over land, and like land belonging to us, but us really belonging to the land. So in this context of migration, of movement by foot, it's really striking to remember that we really are the ones who belong to the earth. There's not really any power that we can assert over it, and we can see it throughout these journeys by land, by sea. Venezuelans throwing themselves, in the water, in rafts, just like Cubans or like Africans, people coming out from the Horn trying to make it to Europe. So it's a really beautiful reminder. And I'm really excited about that piece. And then if we go inside, we'll see a red room. We can see a little bit of that red from the outside. And yes, let's stand in the center. And over here we have a site-specific installation by Juan Diego as well. These are 9 screens, all different, shapes or sizes, and all of them are displaying a different video, about 5 minutes each. They're very still, very subtle, and as you can see, the items that are being displayed are photographs. So it's a photograph that has been photographed as well, and that has been recorded. So there's multiple levels of this media, of like the observation of the object. These photographs are vintage, old photos that the artist has found at shops, thrift shops, vintage shops, most of them in Argentina when he was doing an arts residency there. And in this, atomization of the Venezuelan family, in general, I don't think there's anybody in Venezuela right now that doesn't have a family member or a friend, somebody who lives abroad. Again, we're speaking almost of like a third of the population has left. He remembers feeling this, sensation of loss when his family had to leave. He had to leave. Everybody starts going in different directions, wherever you can go to find safety, to find food. And one of the most, again, valuable things, this whole theme of wealth is really interesting to things like what really are the things that matter, are family photos. One of the most valuable things that migrants lose, in their process, are those physical reminders of what connected them to a family nucleus, whether it is, parents, but it's also friends, it's your community, is your neighborhood, it's your town, your city, your country. And so by finding these, he started seeing these photos and reminding, like, or being reminded, like, oh, it's in the style of like the photos my grandma used to have, or like there's a photo, this kind of, this man looks like my dad, or like trying to find yourself in somebody else's land and in somebody else's stuff, was really powerful. So he had been collecting many of these photos, and intervening them. I don't know if that's a verb, really, intervene. Yes, it is. Intervening them with violence. So cutting, you can see that they're, broken or torn. Some of these are crumpled. And the videos, though they last a few minutes, they're very, very still. What you see is the photograph being pinned to this red, fabric. And why don't we see, maybe like at 4:40-ish, we'll see a little bit of movement. It's a very subtle movement. Let's see. I think at around 4:40 something, 42, you'll see it like shaking a little bit. There we go. The sound, I know right now we're muted, because I'm talking, but oh, that's perfect. Perfect. So as you can tell, they're very, very still. It's a little bit eerie, and it can get a little bit annoying if you stay there for a long, stretch of time. And that's precisely the point. It's very quiet, so you're not expecting anything to move. You kind of wonder, like, why are these videos? These could have just been prints. The idea that they are moving. There's a life that, though, maybe it's latent, it's not the most bright thing, but all of these memories are somehow kept and are like trying to flicker, trying to like be remembered, which is kind of like that sentiment that many migrants have. Of course, then this is the red, which we cannot, escape from. The whole room is painted red to match that red background, which is a red, almost like velvety fabric in which these photographs have been pinned with a little, clavo. I forgot that word. A little thingy that goes through them. It's been they're cutting across their, chest of the photograph. A nail. Thank you, Yarines. A nail, like un pin, un clavito. Which reminds us a lot of entomology, when we see these beautiful specimens of insects, of a butterfly, pinned onto, a plush background, and then just like stabbed. It's a really beautiful, yes, taxonomy as well. Like it reminds us of like this, beautiful, delicate, precious little moments that are being hurt in the process. And the whole red not only is to match that background, but the red also like goes, especially if you're Venezuelan, you'll probably associate red with el chavismo, el madurismo, especially with chavismo, which he didn't invent. It wasn't just like his move. It's existed forever in propaganda, and the color red as one way or a method to elicit emotion and passion and maybe anger. And so it again, it's like trying to put those connections, like why did we lose all of our stuff? Like we were forced to leave because so many reasons, but like the backdrop of it all is also the government. Like it didn't just happen because nothing really exists in a vacuum. And so to still remember the political aspect of this massive migration and the loss and like the amputation of families and memories, it's like an eerie reminder. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this piece. There are many more photos and videos. This is just a selection of 9. that, you know, to try to make it as full, but also not as intimidating as if we had maybe one day, and with like a gigantic budget, we'll do like a full room full of videos. So let's get out of this red room for now, and let's head to the Cassandra artworks. You'll see here on the left very quickly, you pass some books. If you happen to go to New York, it would be great, you know, not just explore the artworks, but, you know, take some time, read some books. Most of them are Venezuelan art authors. A couple of them are not, but they're still related. It's about migration. So we have books not just to give us a little bit of context on the political reasons of what, you know, one of the political aspects of this massive migration crisis, but also of, you know, the beauty about Venezuelan, you know, solidarity in communities, students. It's a really great selection. These pieces by Cassandra Mayela, we have 3. Let me check my time. I think we're still good. We have 3 textile pieces that are hanging from the ceiling, well, not the ceiling, the walls. They have been, Ryan did an excellent job in creating these tension rods, to very evocative of lining, you know, like líneas, lines, clothing lines, that's the word. And the pieces themselves, you can see they feel a little floaty, they feel a little heavy. Now that I see them in person, like they're kind of thick, and they're made of clothes of migrants. Cassandra Mayela is an artist that has been based in Brooklyn for the last 8-ish years. And, you know, she's a self-taught artist. She is fascinated with clothes and the way that they can convey stories and memory. And, you know, clothes is a way that, you know, we express ourselves without using words. And, you know, what that tactile memory would be if you no longer have this, like, what does the message, you know, what is the imprint on the clothes? So a few years ago, she started a project called Maps of Displacement, in which she connected, you know, contacted, had meetings and conversations with different Venezuelan migrants, asking or, like, you know, collaborating with them. And so each person would donate one clothing artifact that of their belonging, donate it to the artist. So to create this like collaborative, collective artwork. So what you see, all of these different colors, all these different textures are all literally pieces of clothing, artifacts of clothing from different Venezuelan migrants that she has met in New York, in Mexico City, in DC a few years ago. Last year, 2 years ago, we had a show at the now defunct Venezuelan embassy, the shell of a building that's been abandoned for many years. And so, yeah, like that process of collecting, of building relationships, of creating, you know, trying to weave all of these stories together, weave the different migration journeys of different people that seemingly may be separated or disparate, like they're not related to each other, they didn't come together, not a part of a family, but they're going through very similar things. I think is a really beautiful effort to then unite Venezuelans even abroad. And yes, the slits in these cases, these are newer pieces from 2023. She's been doing this for, again, a couple of years. The chaleco is from 2019. But the 2 larger pieces are these, you know, long, you can see the slits. And originally, when she, you know, she started making these pieces, they're very big. These are some of the smaller ones. She has some really gigantic ones, like 6 feet or 7 feet long. And she started noticing, because she doesn't have a loom that's, you know, 9 feet long and tall, she starts weaving by section. So, you know, these are, you know, maybe 30 shirts and pants. And, you know, after each section is done, she, you know, sews them together and continues the process. And she started noticing the slits would form naturally because of the different material, the flexibility, their quality, you can pull. So the pieces themselves start to, kind of like create this organic shape. And so for these pieces, she really liked that idea of leaving some slits on purpose to then show like that, the back, the front, the see-throughness of the stories. And these are really fascinating because there is a front and there is a back. The front will, you'll see as you enter the gallery. The back usually has a lot of tags, which is fascinating how like she's able to do and like making sure that the tag of a shirt or something, there we go, stays in the back. And you can read, I mean, sometimes you can see that like, oh, they were made in Venezuela, hecho de algodón, like maybe the tags are in Spanish, but sometimes they're in English. And like, again, you can see that like exchange of culture through the clothes that we're wearing, whether the clothes came all the way from Venezuela or maybe was the first shirt they bought here. And so again, those stories have been recorded by the artist over the years. Every time she meets with them, the people who donate, they actually write, this is a shirt, like maybe a little paragraph, something about the art or about the piece that they donate. And over here, you'll see a selection of 8 of these testimonies, as we're calling them. They're recordings of what the art or what the clothing artifact is. Sometimes people are very inspired and they want to, write a lot. Sometimes it's a little short, like, oh, this is a shirt, it doesn't fit me, or like I got it as a present and now I'm giving it to you to, form part of this larger collaborative artwork. And so these are a little bit hard to read, especially maybe if you're on the phone or a laptop. Let me see if I can find one to read for you all. There's one of the process also, not just of selecting, there's hundreds of these stories that have, been recorded through the years. We had to transcribe them, translate them because they're in Spanish. And so what you see over there is the Spanish and English version. And I will read this one to you very quickly. Let's see. So, es una naranja de voluntad popular. Es una franela naranja de voluntad popular. Escapé de Venezuela como recién graduado, activista por los derechos humanos, miembro de la comunidad LGBT y del equipo de Juventudes de Voluntad Popular. Esta prenda fue parte de una recaudación de nuestro equipo para identificarnos. En una visita de mis padres, ellos me la trajeron con el miedo de ser detenidos por cargarla. Mi mamá la escondió entre capas de otras prendas y logró entregármela. This is an orange Voluntad Popular t-shirt, or Popular Will, which is a political party in Venezuela. I escaped from Venezuela as a recent graduate, as a human rights activist, a member of the LGBT community, and part of the youth team of Voluntad Popular. This garment was part of a fundraiser by our team to identify ourselves. During a visit from my parents, they brought it to me with the fear of being arrested for carrying it. My mom hid it among layers of other clothes and managed to give it to me. That was Carlos Vázquez Cataño. Let me come back to my screen. And so that is just one of, again, hundreds of stories, and really millions. Not millions have been included in the artworks yet. Maybe one day. So far, hundreds of Venezuelans have been in touch with Cassandra over the years. And it's a really wonderful piece because when you start adding these things, each artifact becomes larger than the sum of its parts. You're starting to add not just the person, the personality, the memory, the physical, the tactile memory, but all these stories are being recorded and kept. And so it was really exciting to show these along each other. We hadn't shown these before, and I thought it was important to give not just more context, but to really try to understand. If you saw these pieces hanging from, the ceiling, you might think they're very interesting, and like it would take a minute to like understand what they were made from. So unless you take a tour, which I totally invite you to, and read and go through, do your research, this is like a little extra help and a little extra connection to bring that humanity of these pieces to the show as a whole, while still protecting, their faces. Some people, decided to remain anonymous, and so their names are not there. Some people decided they wanted to tell their story and they are not afraid. They want to, have their name out there. And so that's why you'll see also some of these stories remain anonymous. Some people are like, no, I want to put my name on that. And throughout the show, we start seeing this sense of agency, and whether people choose to tell their stories along with the artists or work with the artists to be able to bring these stories to life and to light, which are very necessary. And then if we turn to the back, the last piece that we are going to talk about is this little backpack, which maybe if you were seeing from the beginning in the video, that first video we saw of Ronald, it made a couple of appearances. Not this particular backpack, but a similar or like a copy of that. This backpack is called the Fatherland's backpack. El bolsito de la patria is how we, colloquially call it. And it's part of an effort from the Venezuelan government to give students from public schools, most public schools in the country, these students receive this backpack that looks like that, fully constructed with materials for their school supplies, notebooks, lapices, pencils, and it's one of those, many positive, really, attempts of the state to, support education initiatives, also in the realm or in the context of them, breaking down and like slashing budgets, not paying teachers, not really fulfilling the full educational dream of the revolution. So it's an attempt, and it is thanked, especially by migrants, because the backpack is very symbolic of the stronghold, or like the chokehold at times, that the government has on the Venezuelan population. And this, again, this paradox that speaks, the title of the exhibition, Build What We Hate, Destroy What We Love, and how these systems that oppress us are at the same time sustaining us. And we sustain them back. We have to participate willingly or less willingly, to be able to really continue this cycle of survival. The backpack itself, is very well constructed, is a good material, is like great quality, and you'll see migrants leaving from Venezuela with that little backpack. It's so strong that it holds on a lot. It withstands a lot of the adversities that people go through during their foot treks. And so, as I mentioned, if you see the video, there's a lot of auto reference, cross references between the artists without them even trying, just because is what's happening in Venezuela. And so in a way, it becomes this symbol of, like what the government gave me, which was this backpack, becomes the thing that I carry across to get out of the country. Cassandra has deconstructed it in a way to, again, think about ways of assembling all of these methods and systems of beliefs, and trying to see like every part of what is making us go through these processes. And it's kind of ironic, it's very cruel irony that it's kind of become a symbol of also the like the Venezuelan migration in general. If you go, New York is full of Venezuelans right now. If you go to the metro, you'll start hearing accents, or, maybe if you're familiar, but you will see that little backpack, el bolsito, and you'll recognize, I'm like, oh, like that's another Venezuelan right there. Like nobody else has that. Like that's us. And so you'll see in lines, in front of USCIS or shelter, I'm like, oh, you start recognizing each other. And so again, it's this like way of identification among the anonymous, blob that is a migrant mass, gives us a chance to connect in the distance. It gives us a chance to connect in adversity. And yeah, it's just a cruel joke. It's just a sick joke that these things, again, just a seemingly innocent object can carry so much weight, both literally and figuratively. So I think I'm gonna stop over here because I'm already hitting the time, and I wanna, thank you all and give you the chance that if you have any questions, you can have them or put them in the chat. Or if you want to, raise your hand and like speak out, that would, I'd be happy to listen to you as well, but not everybody at the same time. All right. Let's see. Nobody. Comments are also accepted. I'm really excited. I feel like I have been working on this show for like maybe the 14 years I've been in the US. When I first got here, I didn't really have the audience to like comprehend what I was going through. I didn't know any other Venezuelans in Washington, D.C., where I am based. And maybe if there was another Venezuelan, they came here to study 20 years ago, like it was a different type of connection with the country. So now, which sadly, it's again, it's that sick joke of, well, now I finally have an audience. Now finally people know what Venezuela is, where Venezuela is, what Venezuelans are doing. But it's because they're here. Now it's 8 million of us out, rather than 2 or 3 when I first moved here. So yes, it's bittersweet to go through this, but also I feel like it's very important to tell these stories, and I'm glad that are finally coming out.
Okay. Haifa, there's a comment in a question in the chat from Camilla. Do all of the artists live in the US now? How long were they in Venezuela before migrating, if so?
Yes, so Cassandra and Juan Diego live in the US. Ronald still not here. He might, but he splits his time between Venezuela and Switzerland for the past few years. Cassandra has been here for about 8 years. She lives in Brooklyn. Juan Diego in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. He's been there for about 2 years. Before that, he had been, in Venezuela and doing some arts residency. Cassandra directly from Caracas, and I've been here again since 2011, directly from Venezuela. Came to request political asylum.
First of all, thank you again so much. You mentioned a little bit about the title at the end, and I wanted to bring it up again. If you could talk about what the title Build What We Hate, Destroy What We Love kind of means, or like how it's in conversation with like the themes and the essence of the show.
Yes. So again, build what we hate, destroy what we love. It's kind of silly word game, but it's really about the paradox of that tension and the nuances between the role that everybody plays in dismantling oppressive systems, whether they be a government, but also belief systems or an economic system, the things that really hurt us. But also we need to participate in, like, we uphold them because we either survive or we thrive in them as well. It's not just about survival. A lot of people thrive in this oppressive environments. Not just those in power, but others who like might benefit from like approximation to the power. And so this idea that like, I didn't really want to blame a finger. And I think that a lot of people, when you have been traumatized, like that first response is blaming and just, fight or flight. And so I've been here doing therapy also for many years. And so like the time has really allowed to, separate those. And like, it's very reductive to think that the government did this, and like, we have all participated in a way, and continue to, uphold these. So when will we be able to destroy that thing that we love in a way, because it's sustaining us, because it's benefiting us, because it's, it shows a facade maybe at some point, and build the thing that maybe complicated and uncomfortable and painful, but like we're gonna have to go through those growing pains to, you know, maybe get to a place of peace or justice, you know. It's still very nebulous at the time. I don't know what the result will be, but I know that it does take a lot of personal accountability and community accountability, and really like stopping that sense of blaming and clanism, like you're that and I'm the other, and you're opposition and you're like Chavista, you whatever, or even like you left, like you're a foreigner, like you're no longer Venezuelan because you're outside, you're not here, no estás sufriendo, like you're not going through the same stuff as we are. So yeah, that's a little bit what it's about. And the artists themselves, through the artworks, you can see like those moments of destruction, like the deconstruction of photos, of artifacts, of the backpack, of the, you know, the objects that have been abandoned along the way, in an effort to build a narrative that better explains or better like makes us reflect about who we are and where do we belong as a nation, as a people, and with ourselves, with our communities as well.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that.
And thank you for the comments. I'm reading a few. I'm like, sorry if I like looking down, but really appreciate all of your comments and support. And I hope that if you're in New York, you can make it to the show. If not, you can go to the Apex Art website and, you know, click. You can do that Matterport. You can do that 3D tour at your own pace, see everything with more ease. But I really hope you can join us. We'll have a couple of other events in person and online. So there's going to be a couple other opportunities to engage.
The question in chat about how long is the show up? It closes March 9th. And just want to encourage anyone, if they have any questions, lots of great comments, but if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or email us. We can pass it along to Fa. I know plenty of people are camera shy and things like that.
Yes, I'm more than happy. Yeah, as Nia mentioned, if you want to connect, I can leave my email or we can be shared, you know, and if you have questions, comments, whatever, happy to, you know, reply, do one-on-one. And so like sometimes it can be a little tricky or difficult, or I don't have the time for it, but like we'll link back.
So I don't know if anyone has any final comments, questions before maybe saying goodbye. Well, thank you again. This was great.
Thank you.
I always learn something new every time you talk about the
Yes.
show. I mean, we did the live and there was the opening and now this, and it's like always like shine a light on something different that I hadn't thought about. So it's very nice to hear you talk about it.
Thank you. I've left my email in the chat if anybody wants to, you know, link. Yes, thank you, Amanda and Camilla. It's really nice to see, you know, familiar names. Jarines is actually joining us in a couple of weeks for one of our other programs in which we'll see Juan Diego's experimental documentary video, and Jarines is one of our panelists. So joining us again, the diaspora, the Venespora, like we have Venezuela, the US, Argentina, Oxford University, Scotland. So it'll be great to, you know, connect.
Thank you, everyone.